Thank you. Well, let's see. There's three of us, right?
I should be on the end because you guys are gonna get to a thing. Nico's gonna introduce you both, and then we'll just kind of get into it.
Someone else that's not up here is going to introduce us. So why aren't you in the middle? No, you don't want to be in the middle.
Star, it's your book. Are you more comfortable that way?
What's your best angle?
That's the thing I'm trying to know. I don't even know what my best angle is. That's the most important thing is my damn angle. I used to know. Using profiles, and I must have had one profile that I said. Oh, actually, I do have something. Excellent. You know, do fun.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry for making a second introduction here, but now that we're in this space together, welcome to Studio Salon, Black Macho, and the Myth of the Superwoman. My name is Nico Whedon, and I am the Public Programs Manager here. And tonight's program is produced in collaboration with Verso Books on the occasion of Lorraine O'Grady Art Is. So I'm glad that you guys all got a chance to get up close and personal with the work. And we're going to frame the conversation by starting with Michele, just kind of talking a little bit about, what she kind of resonated with in the exhibition, and moving on to a public dialogue. So if throughout the conversation you guys have questions, just hold on to them, and at the end, I'll pass this around and you can have them. So just to introduce our panelists, Michele Wallace is Professor of English, Women's Studies, and Film Studies at the City College of New York and the City University of New York Graduate Center. She holds her PhD in Cinema Studies from New York University and is author, obviously, of Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman, but also Black Popular Culture, a project by Michele Wallace, Dark Designs in Visual Culture, and Invisibility Blues, New Edition. The daughter of artist Faith Ringgold, she has also written a number of essays on her mother's work, and we're very fortunate to have Faith with us here tonight, so thank you for coming. And Jamilah Lemieux is a writer, feminist, and senior digital editor for Ebony. She's a fierce advocate for racial equality, social justice, and LGBT rights and acceptance. Her writing has been published in publications including Essence, Jet, Clutch, Medium, Jezebel, and her now defunct blog, but award-winning blog, The Beautiful Struggler. Jamilah is a frequent guest on MSNBC, Huffington Post Live, and Al Jazeera America. In 2014, she was named to the Roots 100 list of the nation's most influential African Americans, as well as the Fortune's list of the most influential women on Twitter. So it gives me great pleasure to hand over the microphone to Michele Wallace to begin our program.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here. What a interesting looking audience. Very female. Anyway, yeah, I guess that sort of makes sense because of Lorraine O'Grady's show and me and Jamilah and my mother and everything. But I don't really know what to say about the show. I've known Lorraine O'Grady, I would imagine, from around the time that she did her first work, which I think was in 80, was it? Mademoiselle Bourgeoisie. Yeah, and she's kind of an interesting artist in that she had a very late beginning of her career. She's a conceptual artist, right? And she has this background in the, what is it called, civil service?
She was a CIA analyst,
I didn't want to say
as
that.
well as a writer for the Village Voice and the Rolling Stone.
I kind of didn't want to say that,
She said it.
CIA is kind
The
of
secret's out.
a curse word, but I know that that's true. There's also another thing is that, so she does this work that I guess is very relaxed in a certain way, because I guess she must have started it when she was about 50?
Mid-40s.
40s, okay. And she did this, like I said, conceptual work. It was a time of, conceptualism, and I have a lot of feelings about conceptualism, which I'm not going to express today, but because I kind of came of age during the conceptual boom, I would call it, and I guess I'm still living in it from the most recent thing that grabbed my attention, which is that performance of the naked black woman on Wall Street. Have any of you seen it? She's kind of large with white high heels, and I guess I kind of missed my chance, because there was this time when we came along in the 60s and 70s, 80s, you only took your clothes off if you looked a certain way. I guess that would be, and you were a certain age, from Yvonne Rainier to Hannah Wilkie and so forth. And now here I am, 63, and finding out that you didn't have to look a certain way or be a certain age. You could actually just put on your white pumps and get your friends to photograph you, and it would be okay. You know, I still can't believe that. I don't know if you've all seen these images, but, and that's another thing. I mean, isn't it true that everybody has seen these images now, just like that? You know, that's amazing, that an artist, that something that we would have called conceptual and kind of avant-garde and off the beaten track, and that no one would have seen, is now instantly seen by everyone and known by everyone. But anyway, but there was one other thing I would say about Lorraine O'Grady, which the curator of the show wouldn't know, which is that that Lorraine told me, is that when I was 9 years old, my mother took me on a trip to Europe on the SS Liberté. It was the last voyage of the SS Liberté in 1961, and Bob Hope was on the boat. The boat was divided into maybe first, second, cabin, tourists. We were in tourist class. Bob Hope was in first class. And I think maybe part of the perk of the CIA thing, Lorraine was on the boat in first class with Bob Hope. And we spent, me and the other kids on the boat, we spent a lot of time looking for Bob Hope. He never revealed himself, but the staff let us, I mean, we toured all the facilities in the boat. They let us go everywhere because we were a band of kids. And everybody else's parents, except mine, were in the bar, which is where we would go and talk to them. And they were wonderful to us. I mean, it was a French boat. This French boat was known for black people traveling, and all the stars traveled on it because, as I later researched, the minute you stepped on the deck, you were no longer in the United States. So all, you know, Louis Armstrong and Dinah Washington, and I mean, you could look it up. They all traveled on the SS Liberté. And that was my first introduction to French culture and a then French racial environment. And it was absolutely fantastic. And thank you very much, Mother, for that wonderful, wonderful trip. But I mean, it was such a gas once to have dinner with Lorraine, and she actually, I think she had seen some mention of that voyage, maybe in your autobiography, We Flew, and she said, well, you know, I was on that boat too. And she said Bob Hope was such an asshole. I mean, she must have been very young, you know, and probably drop dead gorgeous. And he was there flirting with her and acting like a pig and hiding from us, which, you know, showed poor taste in all ways. But anyway. So that's my Lorraine O'Grady connected story. As for the exhibition, I'm amazed by how beautiful it is and how much the people and the women look like now. As a matter of fact, they put one of the pictures was used on the Verso page to promote, I thought was promoting my talk. I didn't know it was Lorraine's exhibition. And I said, isn't that such a wonderful idea to get beautiful young women to put up frames in front of their faces? It never occurred to me that it was dated from the 80s. Because it looked completely like now. It may be that this generation has now made themselves look the way we wanted to look then. Do you think that, Margot, maybe? I think that there's a style thing that we had going on in the 80s that is now your style. And I really respect and admire you for that, because it makes you feel very comfortable. So if you look at those pictures, doesn't it look like it's right now, not then? Because that was my generation, and I don't know. There's something about that is interesting. How can people look so much like they're now?
The images are striking, and a point that you had made about growing up during the conceptual art era, I think is a really nice place for us to start in thinking about your writing, your experience, but also Lorraine's kind of entree into this. It was spawned by a conversation that she had in the context of writing for a feminist journal that was initiated by Lucy Lepard. Heresies. Of course.
Heresies.
And there was, I think they were organized into thematic issues, the journals were, and it was on the topic of a more like social politic, and thinking a little, there, yes. And then there was a kind of subgrouping of women that they consulted, and some were, professors of English, some were Lorraine O'Grady, and others were kind of, she felt, added in to kind of, to bolster the numbers a little bit, get more of the community, get more diversity kind of in that space.
The doing of that.
I'm sure. And the conversation Lorraine had with a woman, a black social worker, it kind of came to be that this woman expressed to Lorraine that avant-garde art has nothing to do with black people. And so Lorraine was furious and took it to the largest black population that she could imagine, which was the African American Day Parade here in Harlem.
Which is coming up, no?
Which comes every September. It's its 46th year this September, and yeah, it was incredible. She organized a group of 15 performers. I told, I think, all of you earlier. Dancers, actors in the back of weeklies, very organically. I think we do it on Facebook now. And just made this work and didn't know how it would appear, didn't know how people would relate to it, and if they would. It functioned as a float in the context of the parade, so it looked just almost like everything else. But as I was explaining earlier, there was a moment, Lorraine had a lot of fear coming into this. She didn't know what would really happen in that space of the public, which is always kind of a scary space to be in, but exciting, it's fruitful. And said that at one point early on in the parade, a woman had said, "That's right, baby, that's me. I'm the art." And she knew it was going to be okay. So just thinking about creating, in 1983 still, that's,
So people could just come up and they were invited to frame themselves.
Absolutely, and the dancers, the performers would go to you, you could come to them, there are police in there. I asked Lorraine the same thing. It was really just the day. It was the spirit of the day, so it was music from other floats. I hope Prince was involved.
Yeah, I was thinking it would be.
83, yeah. There was definitely some Prince then. But I asked Lorraine if she had a soundtrack for the work, if there was any kind of music that she incorporated. And of course, a lot of this was inspired by West Indian culture, Carnival. There's a huge celebration in Brooklyn that she didn't feel like she could really contend with. So she let that lay. She, her strength was making the art and engaging with people. So the music didn't really take a primary place in it.
So what became of these pictures? She didn't print them to 2000. You said she printed them in 2000.
So these images, some of you may have noticed the date is 1983/2009. They were originally printed in 1983. They were then reprinted in 2009 because Lucy Lepard asked to use them in a lecture, which prompted Lorraine to, just revisit them. And as I explained to our audience, they're in a sequence 1 through 40. Typically they're hung in a stack of 3 rows, but they always follow the same logic, and Lorraine really worked that out in 2009. But the quality is gorgeous, and I think that was really important. It's the trace of the performance. How else do you represent an ephemeral practice but in images? So thinking about that also as a documentation of a community. To bring it back here to Harlem is incredible. And
So can I ask you another
Absolutely.
question, just for housekeeping? Can you buy these pictures?
you can buy these pictures, but not from us.
But how does she, from Alexander Gray?
Lorraine is
The
ver-
gallery.
Exactly.
And then there are editions of,
I don't think this is an edition
Edition.
work,
oh, really?
actually.
Can you buy them separately? Or do you have
It's
to
a
buy all of?
series.
Uh-oh.
So,
There's the catch.
we gotta, they belong in an
So in other words,
institution.
museums have to buy them,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
They belong in institutions.
Yeah, and we hope that
To
this,
be exhibited in the original conceptual
Absolutely.
its history. and all that.
absolutely.
Whereas I'd like to grab one of the pictures.
But we'll talk offline later.
I thought you didn't have them to sell. Now all of a
No,
sudden
no,
it sounds
no,
like
no.
you're trying to offer me one.
Are we
You don't make up
recording?
your mind. Can you sell the pictures or not? Those are some pretty photographs to have on your wall.
They are. I think they're powerful too.
Now, with Mademoiselle, just one more question
Yes.
about Lorraine. Mademoiselle Bourgeois.
Bourgeoisie noir.
Now, I thought that was maybe in a parade. Was that a float too?
No, so what Lorraine would do is stage these interventions.
But that was 81, no?
That was 80, 81. The first time she did it was 80. At the New Museum during
You're
Marcia
getting very
Tucker.
close to Black Macho. You know that.
Yes.
That's why I'm interested.
Absolutely. And she wore, her dress with the 180 white leather gloves, and she staged it at the New Museum, and I'm blanking on the second. I think she performed it at Jam, just above Midtown Gallery. Tucker, Marcia Tucker,
Yeah.
that era.
Part of the movement.
But she demanded that black artists must take more risks, and the institution must be more inclusive of black artists.
In 81.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That makes sense.
Well, I mean, I think what I'd like to kind of bring this back to that relates to,
Poor Marsha is dead.
yes.
Unbelievable.
But I would like to connect it to both of your practices and just the publication and thinking about the writing. Of course, we're talking about an exclusion, particularly of black women within the Black Power movement. But then I'm also thinking, as it connects more largely to a black woman as an artist within an art context, kind of demanding that she be seen either through Mademoiselle Bourgeoisie Noire or demanding that the community be seen via the parade and the images still in 1983. So this is just kind of something that I wanted to think through with both of you in relationship to so much of what you work and talk and think about, the Black Lives Matter movement, Sandra Bland. Now there needs to be another hashtag of say her name. So still we're having to insist that we have an image to refer to, right? And that's something you talk about quite a bit in the book, and that really resonated. Because so much of, I think, the work that I'm proud to do here is to kind of validate, in a way, to show images of oneself in the museum context, to assert that we've been there all along. So I kind of opened that to you. It wasn't much of a question, but
Well, I just want to say that my history with this museum goes all the way back to the earliest stages of it, when it was a little place, kind of a loft space on 125th, right off 125th and Fifth Avenue, very near the National Black Theater.
I think it was the National, it was somewhere upstairs, just right
The
there.
National Black Theater owns the whole street, or it did. I don't know what happened after Barbara Antier died. But anyway, the thing is that I go back a ways with them, and as does my mother, Faith Ringgold, who is an artist. I can't remember exactly when the Studio Museum started.
68.
68. Oh, right. That's one of those things for King's death. Yeah. The thing about it is I just wanted to say, there's a whole bunch of things I want to say, reasonably quickly so I don't take up too much time. But one of the things I want to say is that this room we're sitting in, as opposed to where it was, is so, I mean, this is an auditorium. This is, you know, a museum has to have an auditorium that's devoted to people speaking, where people are not leaning their heads against the art, you know, and all of that. It is so terribly, terribly important, and for a long time the Studio Museum didn't have that. As a matter of fact, even when I did the Black Popular Culture Conference, the first evening we had was at the Studio Museum, and we were in the main gallery. And one of the things I thought about at the time, I wanted it to be at the Studio Museum. I wanted it to be in a setting that honored African American art, but it didn't at all. And the people who were there didn't realize why they were in a museum, or what it meant, or what the art meant. And there was sort of this, what would you call it, conflict and tension between the art around them, which they weren't being allowed to touch, and they were being warned not to lean on it or step on it or do all the things that people decide to do to a painting if they happen to find themselves in a room with one and they refuse to look at it, which was the situation. And we needed an auditorium. The next day, the rest of the conference went on at the Dia Center for the Arts, which had auditoriums galore, partly because of their devotion to uncollectible, quote-unquote, conceptual art, what's the other name? Minimalist art, which, so there were many empty spaces and empty rooms, and the art that there was kind of receded away. You know, it was like this. This would be, you know, not that I don't like Donald Judd, I do. I like all of that stuff. But the point is that actually Dia started with the concept to collect, you know, the conceptualists and the minimalist, the conceptualists in particular said, we're going to make art that nobody can collect. Art, you know, earthworks and, you know, I don't know, we're going to wrap mountains or whatever. And Dia started with the mission of, we're going to collect what can't be collected. And we are going to support these artists and give them tons of money. And they're all rich. Dia is so rich. For a while, it did things for black people and political things for about 10 minutes until the conflict between the politics and their money just became so outrageous and extreme that they said, no, 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 we don't need to deal with any of this political stuff anymore. And Black Popular Culture was part of one of the conferences they did when they were still, for reasons that I can't quite fathom, still trying to struggle with that contradiction. And they just said, okay, that's enough. You know, all of you out. We're going to Beacon, New York, or wherever the hell they went. We're closing all our buildings, you know, and they are vast, rich, and as far as I know, still running the art world anyway, because today all it takes is money, as it did then. So that's what I'm thinking. At least, you know, you got this auditorium, that's good, you know, and you can have events and stuff, and you have a lot more space here now. I mean, every time I come here, it's bigger.
And
Seems to me.
Getting even bigger. Did you hear?
No, oh, did I?
David Adjaye Associates.
David Adjaye,
Brand new building
a brand new building.
and auditorium
Where?
right here.
So you're just going to expand on this footprint, right across from H&M.
With competitors.
H&M.
State building.
That is great. That's wonderful. I just hope that your programming will keep pace with the expansion
That's our commitment.
and the greater attention that you attract, and that you will live up to your fabulous collection that a lot of people don't even know you have, because the artists of this community, black artists of this country, have been so devoted to you that they have given you things that they just would not give to anybody else. You have the entire James Van Der Zee collection, right?
And some are in view in the next gallery.
Always. Don't you have a commitment to always keep James Van Der Zee on exhibit at all times?
I
There's
don't know
always
about
some
that.
up. You got the whole thing.
We do, but we use it often.
Exactly. I thought it was like an actual policy. I don't know what Thelma's doing these days, but I thought there was a policy at some point, Mary Schmidt Campbell or Kinshasa or someone, keep some Van der Zee on the walls at all time because they have the whole collection. There's a lot of other things you have too, including work by Faith Ringgold, my mother. So anyway, I'm mentioning Mom. I brought Mom with me, and I'm working my way up to reading something for you. And I decided to read something from a piece that Faith wrote in '81 about my book, and it's called Letter to My Daughter. Faith very much wants to publish it, and I don't know, I don't think she's ever been fully satisfied with my response to it. But this is all part of it. So I have it here on my Kindle, and I thought, I actually posted the first chapter on Facebook, and I thought I wouldn't be as predictable as I usually am and read from the thing I posted. And instead, I would post from the fourth chapter. I would read from the fourth chapter, which is about the thing that I really wanted to address. Generally, if I'd had a chance, I wrote an intro that they didn't publish. When I really would have wanted to address about the book, if I got to, was the second half of the book, which is The Myth of the Superwoman, which I thought was the most underwritten part of the book, because there are so many things that have happened since then to change the situation and the forecasts for Black women, and many of them had already begun in gestation by the time I wrote Black Macho, but I didn't know because the scholarship wasn't there. And one of the things I mentioned in my intro was, for instance, Eyes on the Prize, which is a great documentary series about the 60s and 70s. It didn't exist. Then when it did exist, for a long time, we didn't have DVD players and it wasn't on DVD. So, but now you can go and buy that double set or whatever that I have that I would make a move without, of Eyes on the Prize, and see in your living room a very intimate portrayal of a lot of the media that was made of the time of the 60s and the 70s, of the civil rights movement and Black power. That alone, to have access to that, it wouldn't have been possible in 78 when I wrote Black Macho, but that alone would have completely changed my analysis of everything that went on in the movement. First of all, I think it was made in '88, so I would have been, instead of being 27, I would have been 37. And, that's 10 more years to cook. And then I don't remember when it got reissued on DVD. By then I was probably 47. And so that's another 10 years. And then on top of which, there's just so much writing about the civil rights movement, and particularly, even though it's not talked about much, a lot of writing about Black women in the civil rights movement. A lot of things that it would be very hard for me to have known at, let's say 14, and when I was, what was I, in 1966, I was 14, I think. Okay, so I'm going to read something that my mother wrote about that book and my civil rights movement, and hers. Oh, I need the microphone. Oh my God, I'm left-handed. No, I don't want you to hold it. No. I'm 63. I'm not 103 yet. Okay, April 28, 1980. Here goes. I've never done this before. Dear Michele, I was eager to participate. This is Faith writing to me, and she is 50, and I am 30. No, I'm 28. Dear Michele, I was eager to participate in the early part of the civil rights movement. However, it was not as easy then as you may imagine, getting in a position to make coffee and type. Although I was never terribly fond of doing either, I was willing to do it if that was to be the nature of my assignment. But actually, I was very busy already with you and Barbara. You were both still quite young, and I was newly married to Bertie in 1962, and also teaching and doing my art. When I heard that Martin Luther King's organization, SCLC, had an office in New York City, I called and offered to do some volunteer work for them. I was turned down. That is how I met and came to invite Fannie Lou Hamer to speak at Mother's fashion show, Mother's being my Madame Willie Posey, my grandmother. They suggested that I might serve the SCLC best by helping them to raise money for the voter registration drive they were conducting in the South. The 60s was a period of constriction for the black woman. It was as if we were on the inside of a revolving door that was stuck with the black man and everybody else on the street side. But secretly, I really envied those black and white women who were a part of the early 60s. Constricted or not, they were doing what everybody considered really important, helping the men. You have this to say about the black women of the 60s, quote, "Black women played an important role in the civil rights movement, yet women, both black and white, handled an inordinate amount of typing, coffee making, and housework, in addition to their duties. Black and white women might have fought this inequality together," unquote. Yet black women played an important role in the civil rights movement, albeit on the inside of the revolving door. We knew it, but somehow the fact of our invisibility lacked importance. It was like hearing a great musical performance with no loudspeaker system, easy to forget. We were, that's why. We were just not what anybody meant when they said civil rights movement. Needless to say, nobody ever really thought of black and white women fighting women's unequal position in the 60s. There was no secret about the fact that there was a pedestal between us. The white women were on the pedestal and the black women were not. It was a strain just dealing with racial problems among the women, most of all. The men and women, both black and white, had sexual attraction to cloud their vision. But the women were always very conscious and self-conscious about the black or white female hand that was pouring the coffee or typing the letter. It didn't matter that they were all doing work subservient to the men. The fact was that they were not ready to destroy the pedestal, and that is what fighting the inequality of women would have meant. My very first painting in the American People series, painting in 1963, is about this very same subject. I felt that incredibly persistent racial barrier between the black and white women at Babe's NAACP Life Membership Party in Oaks Bluff, Massachusetts. Babe's was the wife of Dr. Goldsberry, who we stayed with in the summer of 1963, when in Oaks Bluffs, when Faith started painting the American People series. And in spite of the fact that many of the black women there were so white, Babe was very light, they were practically indistinguishable from the real white women. There was still that thing that separated them. It was reflected in their conversations and in their eyes. In my painting, Between Friends, I have a cross separating a black and a white woman. The cross was intended to represent the Judeo-Christian ethic in the vertical bar and the rape and enslavement of black women in the crossbar. But today, I know it is the pedestal I was painting in the shape of a cross. The Black Power movement changed the color of things in the late 60s. The white men had to take a backseat in the leadership of the movement, which meant that they would lead the movement altogether. The white women, especially those with money to contribute and time to spare, continued to work in the movement. Many were now the girlfriends and the wives of the black male leadership, still making coffee, typing, and in many ways even more committed than before. They worked with the black women to show support for the black man's new display of black manhood and black power. And the black man, not to be outdone by her daddy, drove another nail in the pedestal and gave her a reassuring boost up. The black woman suffered in this arrangement. There was no way she could compete. She lacked both the time and the money to try. The black man, recognizing her frustration, began suggesting ways that she might begin to measure up. She listened and made an honest attempt to keep us together. You say the following about this. Quote, all parties managed to agree on at least one issue. The Black Women's Act needed intensive cleaning up. She was too domineering, too strong, too aggressive, too outspoken, too castrating, and too masculine, unquote. It is men who define women in all cultures. The black man had been defining the black woman all along, but now he was trying to change her into a white woman. He said this was to be her new Queen of the Nile black image, refined, serene, passive, respectful, dutiful, dedicated, and most of all, feminine. But what he really wanted was for her to be white, because now that he had white women at his fingertips, he was sure that white was right. Here you are on the subject. Quote, the black man, however, particularly since the black movement, had been in the position to define the black woman. He is the one who tells her whether or not she is a woman and what it is to be a woman, and therefore whether he wishes to or not. He determines her destiny as well as his own, unquote. There were men I knew as colleagues, virtual strangers, who tried to tell me how to wear my hair and what clothes to wear and whether or not I should wear makeup. Of course, I just ignored them, especially since I had begun to understand the hostility with which they were approaching me. They were trying out their new authority to bring me up to their new standard. Now I had to deal with some more prejudice concerning me that I was not about to tolerate. Bertie wasn't telling me how to dress. That's her husband. He had long ago understood that I was not taking advice from him on the subject of my identity as a woman. But many young women were desperately in need of male approval, so they tried hard to comply with his image of them. You speak of how desperate you were to be approved by the men of your time. Me again. To me and many black women, the black movement seemed to guarantee that our secret dreams of being male-dominated and supported women were that much more attainable. If black men had power, as in black power, then we would become the women of the powerful, unquote. Men did not change in the 60s as some younger women believed they had. Women changed. They began to believe what they wanted to hear the men say instead of what was being said. Of course, they were all the more inattentive listeners for another reason. They had the pill. The pill seemed to liberate only the torsos of their bodies, while their sensory organs, including the brain, underwent the most extreme form of apoplexy. She became inert. For the first time since God knows when, the black woman was quiet. You have this to say about her, quote, therefore her strange numbness, her determination, spoken or unspoken, to remain basically unquestioning of the black man's authority, and thereby seemingly supportive of all he has done, even that which has been abusive of her. She is in the grip of Black Macho, and it has created within her inestimable emotional devastation. The black woman's silence is a new silence, unquote. She was waiting to hear the words, I love you. But love is not sex, and sex is not free. At least since the beginning of time, there have been simple-minded women who have known that. However, sexual freedom became a euphemism for free sex. In fact, in the 60s, everything was free, especially love. And love was sex, and sex was a youthful invention introduced by your generation. And everybody agreed that it was correct because young was in, and everybody who could possibly pass was young and beautiful. But secretly, the women didn't really mean to give anything away. They were trying to make an honest exchange for a man. They were trying to find someone, like the song of my youth said, who would last past Saturday night. Then the women were left alone. He'd reaped the major benefits from the women's sexual revolution and split. He'd become weary of after having had some of hers and some of hers and some of hers. And he decided that what he really wanted was none of hers but some of his. The others who retained interest in womanizing became too spoiled to appreciate the difference in them. He would make target number one on the first meeting and be off to number two by the time number one turned over. That kind of shallow communion was not at all what was meant by the sexual revolution. Women wanted something on their own terms, but the men were not ready, and neither were the women, for the responsibility of women's sexual freedom after 2,000 years of sexual servitude. The men fought that women's sexual freedom, found that women's sexual freedom was a jolt to their manhood. He could not stand to have her give it to him without even being asked, and then tell him what she wanted, and after, how it was or was not. I'll stop there. So anyway, I don't have like a shape to my thing, but I think I've said enough, and it's time for, right? I mean, I'm sort of reading a quote from Faith. You know, it's all very circular. She's talking about my work in Black Macho, and I'm reading it aloud to you. And I don't know how to get out of this.
I think she's leading, so maybe she can help us.
It's kind of a conceptual situation, except I don't have a concept.
Very rich now.
Yeah, you're in charge. That's, you know. That's
Well, it was my understanding that we were just in conversation,
oh,
so
really? Okay.
not needing to guide this necessarily.
No, I just slapped down
It's all right.
something in the middle of the conversation.
No, that's okay. I think that we
always
could just
like to read
respond.
things.
You're a good reader. It was lovely.
Thank you.
But I hope that maybe we could respond to that a bit. Actually, maybe what I'd like to go back to is this issue of identity. There's a point to bring it back to Black Macho, to the book, it's towards the end where you say, it is extremely difficult to assert oneself when there remains some question about one's basic identity, which my intention was to connect that to the impetus for Lorraine for creating Art Is, for asserting oneself, one's identity, creating an image. And I hear your mother in that kind of walking you through her experience, the evolution of women's place in things, you know, that suddenly after 2,000 years, there's a sexual revolution, there's a switch, there's a passing of the control torch maybe in some way. But what I also appreciated in your preface to reading from your mother's letter was not having kind of like the knowledge outside of what you were writing about, like outside of your experience, kind of who was there. And I remember being struck in another passage of the book where you're kind of like demanding to know like who could you conceive of, you know, in terms of Black female filmmakers, artists, writers, thinkers, who could contend with who was in like the popular consciousness, right? And I wanted to kind of think about that in terms of today. I mean, we have your mother, we have you as a writer, we have you as a writer, you know, so it's just, I think we're kind of in the mix now.
Yeah.
I would like to think anyway that there's some stronger sense of identity or
Oh, there's
presence.
no question about that. I mean, my thing is always, though, that I'm a little bit stuck in the past in that I made, you know, I'm a little bit stuck in the past in that I think I made a big mistake not giving Black women the credit they deserve for what they were able to do and achieve in the time that they did. But I didn't know. And I think maybe perhaps there's a lesson in that for young and women of all ages who look at a younger generation who maybe sometimes say, like your teenage daughters or whatever, oh, Mom, please, you know, that in fact they will one day mature into women who will be able to read and appreciate and understand whatever it is you have provided for them. You just sit it to the side and make sure it's safe. And they will not continue to be teenagers forever. They will not continue to, I remember there was one thing that Faith said, there's this wonderful film, and there was an exhibition of women in pop art, and Faith was included in it. And in this film, one of the things Faith said about, or maybe in Makers or someplace else, is that, or maybe some other interview piece, is that you don't deal with sexual oppression until you absolutely have to. No woman would ever address it if they could just continue, you know, flitting around in a short skirt and heels and, I don't know, being cute. and getting away with it, being cute and getting away with it, and not having to address the fact that, you know, your time is shorter, your envelope is shorter, your opportunities are shorter. What it is you're playing with is dynamite, your youth. And you can see it in every field in which women function, even today. Even today in some of the landmark things of film and television and music, we watch as women, the most gorgeous women, you know, take your pick, Beyonce, Erykah Badu, Lauryn Hill is already, you know, I mean, I've had students in my office trying to explain to them about Lauryn Hill, that she's not some crazy old woman. And I mean, this is within the immediate memory of her being plastered all over every magazine, in every fashion layout. Now we're going through that with Beyonce. We go through it with all of them. But they have a shorter shelf life based upon some things which don't involve any kind of equality whatsoever. So, you know, the point is that, but you see, it's interesting that Beyonce has spoken about feminism. But of course, everyone, you really, really address sexual oppression and the way in which it constricts your entire life. Not exactly when you're right. It's not characteristic to do it right at the point at which you are the focus of the, you know, the sex beauty machine. It's not, that's not, I mean, if you do it some, that's good. But don't expect anybody who's in the full glare of that light to say, no, fuck that, I'm not having it, you know. It's interesting to watch. I mean, look at, what's her name, Monet? Janelle Monet, the one with the bump in the front? You notice she's doing ads, right? Who for who? Somebody took the hair down, made a different hairdo. Yeah, for the ad money, which, I mean, you know, who can fault her? Nobody would fault her, but the whole, and maybe, I don't remember whether it's a natural hairdo or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was some,
It's a natural look, but I don't think.
there's some add-ins and, you know, I mean, once you, I thought that that bun and the tuxedo and all of that was about rejecting that whole package. But, of course, you know, for a young woman, it's about being successful. And she can be much more successful. She does other things with her hair, and she wears other kinds of clothes. And she needs that money, because the fact of the matter is, the period during which she has the window of doing that is much shorter. And that's as true now. It's even more, well, back then, we didn't have ads. Back in my day, we didn't do makeup ads. We were not eligible for that. But it's still, you see what I mean? It's still true. So it's, I think it's, maybe what I'm trying to say is I think it's important that women regard themselves in terms of the entire, you know, we're lucky now. We live a lot longer. So why not consider us as a species that lives 80 years, and to expect certain things of people in their first 20 and some other things in their second 20 and the third 20 and the fourth 20, rather than fixating on what, 15 to 30? And then just being absolutely astonished that any woman can do anything, that Serena can even swing. I mean, you can't believe it. She must be bionic, right? You know, that she's winning tennis things. And she should be in a, you know, on crutches somewhere, in a wheelchair, right, in a home somewhere. For old tennis players, right?
Was that the response that you got at 28? Was there an expectation that you had said your piece and could be cycled out?
Well, you know, it was weird though, you know, because there was a whole group of people who thought of me as very young, too young to know anything or say anything. On the other hand, I was approaching 30, and in those days, 30 was the big 30. I mean, as a female, there were certain things you were supposed to have done by then. And I hadn't done any of them. However, but then there were all these other people, the way I was being received. I mean, when I saw Julian Bond in the airport one day, he didn't look at me like I was almost 30. You know, I got a whole other look that had something to do with being closer to 20, you know? And I couldn't believe it because I knew he had to disapprove of everything I had to say. And so many men would give me that look because that's about the other thing, right? The other thing, which is that you need to make it happen, either get yourself a man of power who can claim you, or you need to go to bed with me, or whatever. But the point is you're going to be done around the time you're 40. And I'll sleep with you, but I'll never admit it. Well, I mean, look at Bill Cosby. Didn't I say more?
Let's not.
Go ahead, Jamilah.
I'm sorry. I was going to wait for an invitation to join the conversation, but I think I'm
going nuts here.
No, you're fine. You are. It's such a blessing to be able to hear you speak, Michelle. Seriously. I'm still very much starstruck by this woman who had so much to do with the development of my feminist identity. And now that I know that there are at least a handful of young black women who I don't really think I need this. Do I need it? Okay. Thank you. They make me
You can be heard. Can you be heard?
I think I can be
We've
heard.
been speaking with this, and we don't need that?
No.
Are you recording? Okay.
So you
But
do
is it
need
still recording her? Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I'm glad you're recording.
Oh, okay.
This is the first time anything we've said has been recorded for this.
So far as you know.
So honored. Very honored. Go
So what
ahead.
are we talking about, guys? No, sorry, I'm just kidding. No, because I know that at least a few young black women identify as feminists because of my work, which is still something very crazy for me to wrap my brain around, and that so much of my feminist identity came from you to share space with you. I'll listen to you talk all night long, so you'll never be able to look to me to to push back, because that's such a true gift and a privilege.
I guess my mother wishes she could say that.
She's very
But
proud.
she pushed me out there, in all truth,
Absolutely, absolutely.
as you will push your daughter.
Yes, yes. And as the daughter of a mother who I have a complicated and rich relationship with, who's certainly pushed back against some of my feminist writing, and now the mother of a young daughter, I look forward to the day where my daughter is able to receive my criticism in the way that you are able to receive the love and adoration and critique that your mother provides for you. in that
Thank
book.
you. I hope my mother will agree with that when the evening is done. We're still experimenting.
So I did have a thought a few minutes ago that I wanted to share when we were talking about the exhibit, and I kind of thought about connecting it to the work that you did in Black Macho and what you've done throughout your career as a writer and what I've tried to do in my modest career as a writer. Just that framing of black life, right? Like how phenomenal black women are at actually holding up a frame to who we are as a people, to defend our humanity, right? To make it plain to people that go out of their way to ignore it and who try not to see it. And I think that's why some, not all, but some people were kind of triggered by Mother Toni Morrison's commentary around Ta-Nehisi's book, which I'm reading now, and I think it's absolutely phenomenal. You know, but just that we're always, I do. He's a fantastic writer. I've been reading him since I was in college, and you know, I think he's great, and it's great to see him get these sort of accolades. But I think there was some pushback from a number of pretty well-known black female writers saying he's wonderful, but this book cannot be the definitive story of black America because, one, how long are we going to center our men as the blacks? And two, they felt forever. Not forever. We're working on it.
But what did Mother Morrison say?
Well, she said that
You know, I have been ignoring this thing as best I can.
I had to make you download it like I made you download the Beyonce album. We were on the phone doing an interview, and Beyonce had dropped the Secret album like 2 days before. It was me, and I was like, I think you should download it and listen to it. She's talking about feminism, and you did, and you liked
It
it.
came to me. That's what I loved about it.
Yes.
Is that I didn't have to go to Tower Records or go get one video or anything. I could just be in my house and download the whole thing, and it was visual,
Yes.
which just really, I loved it.
It was a moment. It was a good black girl moment, and we don't always get as many of those as we should. And I have his book on my phone, so I didn't have to go to Barnes and Noble or anywhere or send off for it on Amazon, so you can read it on the train.
Put it on my phone.
I'm going to put it on your Kindle.
But now, what did Mama Morrison say? Because, you know, I love her.
Yeah, we all love her. She said that he filled the void that was left by James Baldwin, which is something that people have been wrapping there. People freaked out about that pretty hard. I just got, who did?
Lonnie said it too.
But, well, yeah, well,
It was just another
writer friend.
Yes,
Yeah.
Black
that
woman?
we both, Bomani.
Bomani Jones.
A man.
A man.
Another man.
Another.
But wait a minute, Morrison is a woman.
Yes.
Okay, but sometimes she forgets, but anyway, we're not.
Yeah. Don't tweet that. But, but I think
You must.
I think aside from the idea that Baldwin occupies the space of Baldwin and that we don't need another Baldwin, we needed a Ta-Nehisi Coates, that we're always waiting. We just had to anoint a man
But now, was
in that
a
way.
blurb?
Yeah.
Yeah, that
That was
sounds
her-
like a formal kind of, you know, send-off, log-rolling endorsement
Yeah.
thing that people say when they've been asked to blurb something,
Yeah.
which I don't know if you can really take. I would not have.
Don't take it too seriously.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you know, what's she gonna say?
Maybe that he's in the tradition of Baldwin, shades of Baldwin.
Now, one choice. Either send the book back and say nothing, or try to say something significant.
It got the people
Gosh,
talking.
damn it.
She sure did. She did.
And then the only way you can deal with it is it puts me in the situation of I have to read it.
Now you have to
And then the people who've never read Baldwin have to read Baldwin, because, you know, a lot of people are yelling Baldwin and they haven't read Baldwin. You know that, right? It's a lot to read. Ain't that nothing? So that's what this is all about.
But and also it's a beautiful book, and he's on the cover of, is it New York Magazine or the New Yorker this week? The New York or the New Yorker? We have two different votes. New York. Thank you. He's on the cover of New York Magazine.
Friends with his family.
He is.
Is he gay?
No.
Well, I don't see how that works. I don't understand. How can somebody who's not gay replace Baldwin?
Right. Right. I don't think that. I think that there's some. We're gonna let this man hijack our feminist conversation?
No, I'm just saying, you know, we can do a thing about sexuality
Yeah.
a little bit, which we were talking about.
Absolutely. I'm just.
And,
teasing.
well, that's interesting. Okay, well, Morrison's like that. She'll do that. Okay.
Don't tweet
it.
that.
I'll read it.
We'll talk
You
about
just
it.
gave it an endorsement.
I did. I think it's a good book. You know,
It's not about women, am I right?
not the first 100 pages. So I don't know what happens after that. So far, he buried the lead. He buried
He
somewhere.
have a mother.
He had a mother. He talks about his mother.
Straight, so he has a
Straight. He talks about meeting his wife and girls he dated when he went to Howard. So women are present, but in terms of feeling like this is the story of black people, it feels it is the story of cisgendered, heterosexual, middle-class black man from a working class background. No, no.
I'm only kidding. Read the book.
But Jamilah,
But I'm prepared to hate him.
Oh,
I'm 63, I can hate him.
We're going to let you take that up with him after you read the book.
Okay.
But Jamilah, you started by, like, being impacted by that frame and framing femininity and framing the black community and, like, the power in that. Do you think that the piece was successful in kind of, like, showing the full range of that community in the images that you saw? Not only, Artis, the one that we just looked at in the other room. I gotta bring it back a little bit.
I think it was successful in showing diverse people and images of black folks and black life that exist, particularly in Harlem or New York City at that time. There were more women, right, than men. You could argue, I didn't count, but that jumped out for me. And I think it's interesting because when we are telling stories, when we are framing black life, we kind of have to not over-represent ourselves. We have to make sure that we're there. And kind of how I tie it, you know, to what people are saying about Ta-Nehisi's book is when other people, meaning black men, are framing blackness for broad audiences, oftentimes we're not present. And that's why your book is so, significant even today, that we're still doing this work to make sure that we are adequately represented. It's not about saying that we are the matriarchs or the leaders of the community and it would not survive without us, which you can make a very valid case that the community would not survive right without our leadership. But simply saying that, hey, we exist, we're as human, we're as black as our men, our concerns are as black. So what happened to Sandra Bland is as much a black problem as what happened to Michael Brown. But yet this is the first time we've ever had this level of conversation about a victim of police brutality who was a woman.
Well, that really brings up my issue with it, is that I've always had a problem with conceptual art. And the problem is politics. And I am particularly concerned about it because I know how alienated most African Americans are from visual art. And part of it is because often art doesn't have anything to do with politics. And black people are very political, as the issues that you had mentioned, these things about police brutality, et cetera, South Carolina, et cetera. The art world has embraced a way of making art which generally marginalizes politics. I mean, you just are not supposed to be political, and part of, the sort of the idea of conceptual art itself is somehow to make something out of something which takes politics and puts it, and fraught issues of identity that will get you killed. Let me define what I mean by politics. Fraught issues of identity that will get you killed, and puts it on the side burner way away somewhere. And this is something that I hate that the art world does with unceasing regularity today. I think it's racist. Not to say that black conceptual artists are racist or anything, but just this idea of reordering the priorities of the world as one in which issues of identity that will get you killed is considered at the bottom or irrelevant is deeply problematic for me. And I feel like, when black people say, well, they ignore art, they don't come to the Studio Museum, they don't come to see art, they don't have anything to do with it, they don't support it, they don't know who artists are, they don't, our children don't learn anything about art. It's all about that. It's all about that. And I don't understand why, well, I don't understand why conceptual art is so apolitical. I know that it traces back to Marcel Duchamp, and for some reason people think that Marcel Duchamp was so cool that it didn't matter that he wasn't political. But to me, the cool factor just, these, what is it now, 60, 70, not sure how many years it's been since he came over here from World War II. The cool factor is, it's not getting it for me. And just because the conceptual artist is black.
You know what, that's interesting. And I think that that's a very common critique of our entertainers as well, that being cool is enough, right? So they don't have to be political, and we defend.
But they're what do you call it? They're motivated by finance. But actually, some of the black conceptual artists are motivated by that too. I forgot. There's some very successful. That's another thing. Is black conceptual art is now on the financial map. And I won't name any names, but some people making some serious bread behind conceptual art on, I think, the mistaken notion that there's some politics in it that I just don't see. All I see is the money.
Yeah. One thing that you mentioned earlier.
I say Lorraine O'Grady's one of them. She's obvious. I don't think she is, but I don't know. Not that I know of. But anybody could be. As long as you don't have the politics in it, you can sell it. As long as you keep the politics out. That's all the art world asks for. You can scrape your shoe on this chair, or you can make it as big as this room and have every hair It doesn't matter. Just as long as you don't fuck with the politics.
Do you guys
That is to
mind?
say, issues of identity that will get you killed.
Sorry, I'm just going to interject here. I just want to open up the conversation just because I know that there's been people with a few things to say and maybe particularly questions related to the book or related to the exhibition. Because this is such a large conversation that we're having, I just want to be able to kind of keep it within the space and the time that we have. So if there's something that you would like to say, please just raise your hand and I'll find you. Okay.
they don't really get that like danger that a black man would get. So like, I more so want to understand. I'm not trying to like battle it. I just want to understand what you
Okay. So, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story of Sandra Bland, but I would wager to say that the reason we're talking about her is because that officer treated her immediately as if she was a dangerous person. So,
Whole list of a whole lot
There are-
more black women.
a lot of black women who have been profiled by police officers or black girls who've been identified by school teachers and principals, right, or employers, right, or people working at the mall, white women walking down the street who clutch their purse at me and I'm dressed like this and I look like this and I sound like this. So I don't think that while, yes, black men are more likely to be directly confronted with the idea that they are dangerous, that notion exists about us and is very pervasive. It's not an uncommon experience. I mean, who of the black women in this room can say that they've been made to feel that somebody thought they were dangerous? Angry, overly aggressive,
All you gotta do is be tall.
or short, or small, you know, just be black. So it's something that we have in common. So I don't think that, certainly black women have done nothing to belittle, trivialize, or reduce the very real threat that black men face at the hands of society. And I think we've done a better job than anyone, including black men, in supporting black men's attempts at liberating themselves and traveling safely, right? And it is not something that we've been able to expect in return. And I think that, I don't want to just use you as an example, but I just think the idea that things just really aren't as bad for us, or that we're not seen as being threatening, or that we're just, it's a different kind of thing. They don't like you either, but they don't think you're going to kill them. That's kind of used to wave away the need for black men to effectively engage the ways that we are brutalized and treated as criminals. And this is so important. I'll just say one quick thing. Right before the Sandra Bland case came to light, before it happened, before she died, there's a popular, and I won't say his name, it's a radio show here that posed a question to their audience about and the question was, are black women angry? Right? Are black women angry? And had this whole dialogue about this stereotype, or this notion of the angry black woman as a source of derision, not like, hell yeah, black women are angry. Why wouldn't we be angry? Are you not angry? Well, why aren't you angry? You should be angry too, black man. But the idea that this was something, right? That we were something to be, ridiculed or laughed at or corrected. And then 4 days later, you have a black woman who's treated as an overly aggressive suspect because she's like, why are you pulling me over for this? This doesn't make any sense. I'm smoking my cigarette and driving and doing what I got to do. Give me my ticket and let's keep it moving. And now her life is over. So that's not really a stereotype that we can take lightly.
Does anybody else have a question? Comment? Reflection? Yeah.
Hello to the room. I'm kind of young, I'm only 23, but I just felt really moved to just make a comment because the reading that you were reading from your Kindle really resonated with me, and I'm only 23, and it's just kind of, it's funny, but it's not funny that black men still treat black women the exact way in my generation as a millennial. Like, some of my interactions with black men, not necessarily sexually, but more so, I guess I'd say even friendships with black men. It's just interesting because sometimes black men will come to black women and you're kind of coddling them. You're a mother figure to them. But as a black woman, it's kind of seen as just a role that we feel like we want to take with a black man. And then if you try to like do anything romantic with sometimes those individuals, they are not really necessarily interested, even though you've kind of coddled and you've helped them along a path or a journey. And then when it comes to like sexual subservience and just the role that black women, I guess, kind of in the millennial generation, it's just interesting to see the images of black women in media and how there's just so many different figures out there, and it's just all kind of like deja vu kind of in a way, how history kind of repeats itself. And it's just really, like I said, it's funny, but it's not funny that the what you were reading, I was just thinking of guys that I've dated, guys that I've dealt with, and it's just like, wow, like that's still happening now, and that's just really unfortunate. So I just wanted to make that comment.
I confirm that, of course, and I just wanted to mention too this book called At the Dark End of the Street. There are many books, but this is just one that would pose the stories of many black women placed in the situation of this newest case. What's her name? Sarah Bland? Sandra Bland. And it's a wonderful study of that. It had a lot to do, the way the police respond to black women has a great deal to do with the whole civil rights movement and the Black Power movement. And what happens if we are perceived as angry, and we are always perceived as angry. I mean, look at Shonda Rhimes, you know. We had to all bear hearing that her success was based upon the fact that she has this one character, which is an angry black woman. And she's an angry black woman. And that's why she has these 3 shows. And for some reason, the whole world wants to watch black women blow up and be angry. And so anyway, but the book that I was going to mention just quickly as a reference to some of the cases, including one, was it Little? Joan Little, right? Oh, yeah. Joan Little would have been the latest case in this book, who I think she fought back against the jailer, and she was killed in jail. I don't remember the case exactly. Let me not try to run it. Joan Little, though. A lot of black women. Joanne Little. She's been written about a lot. And that's, you know, part of the thing with black women. I mean, these things happen to us, and in 15 minutes, nobody can remember the case, you know. But At the Dark End of the Street, Black Women, Rape and Resistance, A New History of the Civil Rights Movement, from Rosa Parks to the Rise of Black Power. And I think the last case in the book is Joanna Little, by Danielle L. McGuire. And it's really a great study of that. But I think that you'll find in any book in which a black feminist is dealing with the civil rights movement and or black power, many cases like this as being the catalyst, the interaction between black women and the police, or that kind of violence against black women. And I don't understand why it's always the cases of the men that we only see. They're the archetypes. It's the archetypal beating or killing or torture. And even in the case of South Carolina, in which most of the people who were killed were women. I mean, it was an archetypally, to me, female type situation. Nonetheless, we turn it into yet another story about a black male Christ figure. Maybe it is because of Christ. Maybe that's the key. Maybe it's the patriarchy. You know, maybe it's our religion. Maybe it's what we eat for breakfast. I don't know.
So if there aren't any more questions, do you have one? Yeah, okay.
I'm going to bring it back to art. Oh, my name is Jamie. Hello, everybody. Thank you guys for speaking and for hosting this program. So I'm bringing it back to art is I was really moved the most by the images where there was sort of ambivalence, like a person in the foreground was like smiling and there's a person in the background staring at the camera but just totally, mute. And I was interested in, I don't know if you know this or not, but if whether there were pictures where there was a person framed, but there's more of a ambivalence with them. They're not comfortable, like cheesing for the camera, or they're sort of like, me as a center person. It made me think about when you said about forming identity, like how can you express your identity if you're still formulating it? And I guess I was just interested in that, like in the photos and also just in real life, women sort of trying to understand their place in the world and then as objects to be seen by other people. So.
It was also something I was thinking about when we were talking about the Beyoncés and some of the female figures that get cycled a bit more quickly, and then just thinking about like the framing of Black femininity. Somehow, at least for me, Lorraine's images, they don't sexualize women. There's none of that. It's just, it's an empowerment. It's a celebration, I think, more so. And I really love that about the images. And to answer your question, there are two that I can think of in this series. There's one, art is, parentheses, caught in the frame. And it's this man who's just like not here. He's not in the parade. He's not of this world. Like, he's on some other trip, maybe quite literally. And he's so disoriented that I don't think he even knows that he's in that image. And that's a strange one. And Lorraine and I talked about that. And then the final image in the series, girl pointing, it's on the wall text wrong, where she's smiling at you and pointing. Is she smiling with you? Is she smiling at you? Is it playful? Is there tension there? And that being another one of the images that Lorraine really enjoyed for its ambivalence. So I appreciate you kind of picking up on that, because in a public work, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know if somebody's going to be pissed off that you're taking a picture of them. You don't know if they're going to be engaged and excited to be captured on camera because they wonder where their image is going to be projected or shown. And that's a risk that Lorraine took in that way. But I think it was really beautiful, you kind of paralleling that with the idea of forming one's identity, like not always having a clear focus or not always having a straight answer for what's going on as you're being framed by others, by yourself, who has the power in that.
This work is really very substantive compared to mostly, when I'm thinking the idea of conceptual art. But the other thing, what she's asking about is a question that I had too in terms of the way Lorraine framed the work, is there must have been other pictures. Because first of all, wasn't it also she asked people to send pictures in?
Yes.
So there must have been other pictures that she didn't include in the series.
Sure, there's an editorial process there.
Right. Because they're beautiful photographs. Her part of the work is that she put them together and created the situation to document them. But they, apart from all of that, they are beautiful photographs. And I guess they have different authors?
Yes.
Do you have the names of the people?
No, which is interesting because it felt like it was more of an organic collective. Well, I mean, I think they engaged in that willingly, It wasn't like you're going to be named as a co-author in this. It's like, if you want to share images from this, I will take them,
Ooh.
But I don't think there was a contractual agreement in there.
Right.
And people have asked that question, like, is everybody kind of like in agreement to be in these
in that
photographs?
case, this is kind of like street photography.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's getting harder and harder to do street photography because we're all so self-aware and conscious, and we all have cameras. And
Absolutely.
we all want to, have our copyright protected.
Lorraine and I had a long conversation, and one of the aspects that we were talking about was in 2015, though there's a proliferation of images and you kind of can't get away from being captured in some way or seeing too much, how resistant people are. She went to Brooklyn a couple months ago to document a carnival, I think, maybe it was even last summer, and tried to repeat the same thing, and it was just like,
Couldn't do it.
I will not engage with you. I'm totally resistant to this. But then seeing
That's what I was
like that
thinking.
by turn.
I mean, I think that, it may even be that the age of street photography has passed. Yeah. With the new technology and the digital, it's interesting that I don't know why one would preclude the other, but it seems to have effectively ended most of, you really have to go a ways to figure out how to do street photography now. Get a population that is, I don't know, for the most part, so distressed that they don't really care that you're taking pictures of them.
Because the other thing is,
It's mostly what you see now.
and you're thinking about where the pictures are going, right? In ways that if it only could exist in a book or a newspaper before, that doesn't quite have the same, it may not give you the same sort of fear as something that could end up on the internet.
Yeah.
Right, and it's a
That's
picture,
true,
and
too.
it lives forever and ever and can be used in any number of ways. And if it's an unflattering picture of you that a lot of people can see and you didn't consent to it,
And maybe you weren't supposed to be there
Right.
when you were?
that's
That too.
Who you were with?
I've shut down a lot of European tourists trying to take my picture.
Sure.
Like,
Who wants European tourists taking our pictures?
they don't ask.
125th.
I leave the camera out and just like, not on display.
Sure.
Just being American.
Right, just living my life, walking down the street. No, but I think there is like an issue where where we understand that we can control the image, that we're not necessarily as willing to be subjected to being a part of an image, like just having that kind of authority and license.
I think to the same point, if you look at social media, it's such a stark contrast to the no, don't take my picture, but it goes into the whole framing concept of, I want to frame my picture my way, and I'm fine with sending my picture out into the universe and it being there through perpetuity, but I don't want you to do it. Right. And it's, unless of course I've already said, okay, it's the right angle, it's the right, selfie stick, etc.
I see a bunch of hands going up. I just want to let you guys know we're running out of time. I want to give the microphone to you because you've been waiting. But I also want to leave time for people to come up and buy or have a copy of the book, which we have on the stage. So I'm just going to give you the mic and then wrap it up.
Good evening. I have a question about going back to the book, particularly as someone who's just recently embraced feminism in the last couple of years, and reading the book. I'm 36. So I was raised a church girl. So so reading the book recently, and then reading Jamilah's introduction and knowing Jamilah's writing, I'm interested, and then hearing the conversation of what you didn't know then in writing. I'm interested for Jamilah, what are you learning then from this process? Having the benefit of the I wish I would have known, or what are you learning in the process in your current writing? And for you, what would you have written knowing what you know today?
I'll be brief. Thank you, Joy. I'm 31 as of yesterday, and I'm 31. 31.
No wonder you're so intimidated by me.
How did you think I was?
I'm your grandma.
Oh, you're younger than my mother. You're younger than my mom.
But
And,
we all have our
conceivably
lifestyle.
You could be. I started writing consistently at 21 or 22. Professionally, I'd say I was 23 or 24. And there's a lot of stuff that I think back, I didn't say that the right way, particularly as it relates to gender and engaging Black men and wanting to keep them accountable and love on them at the same time. There's some things that I'm glad my old blog isn't on the internet anymore, and I have control over what people can read beyond the past.
You could remove it.
Well, a hacker took it down, so I still have access to the work, but somebody did it for me, but it was kind of a blessing in disguise. But having read the first reissue of the book where you said, you know, if I knew then what I know now, here's what I would have done differently, and then having spoken to you and read the intro that you had originally intended for this edition, it's something that stays in the back of my mind with my writing now, I think. So I'm trying to, I will inevitably, I hope I'm not the same person at 63 that I am at 31. Like, I hope there are things that I would say differently and things that I've learned and things that have changed. But I'll say that the general attitude, you know, and approach to feminism that I've had since I was a teenager is the same, you know. So it's difficult to play all these things out in public and to have grown up because people watch me online go from being 22 to being 31, and people have watched me bump my head, and I've had people say, you're very different now in how you say some very hard to read things, and you're saying the same stuff, you've just gotten better at expressing it. So I hope I can stand by my work in 30 years the way that Michelle is able to stand by hers, but also keep herself accountable to the things that, you know, she feels that she did wrong.
I had some down years.
So yeah, on that note, I think we should wrap it up. Thank you so much. And obviously be sure to go back out through the exhibition so you can kind of see it on the way out again. And if you want a copy of Black Macho,
Need 40 minutes.
you're just giving them away?
I don't think so. I think they might be on sale for $10.
Thank you, ladies.
The big thing is that it's on Kindle. I believe.
I don't even know how to use one of those.
You can do it on your phone. You got a smartphone?
I do.
Just download the Kindle app. And then get you started. It is very nice. You know what I mean? It is very nice.
I didn't get back from Arizona. Your public